Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Capital Strategy, Find and Secure the Right Capital Optionality. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I am a program assistant at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. And so, as you will see in the chat in a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So definitely make sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. And then just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. Always great to connect. And second, we will open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. So please make sure to submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will try our best to get to all of them. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. And so before we get started, we always like to launch a couple polls to step back and see how everyone in the room is doing today. So this first one is going to ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? And I'll give everyone just a few moments to submit a response here. Thank you for participating. All right. Texas, St. Lucia, Mississippi, South Carolina, Virginia, Silicon Valley, Las Vegas. Welcome, everyone. All right, I'm going to end this poll. Share these results. Looks like optimism's in the lead. We always love to see that, but we do have some feelings of anxiety and surviving. If that's related to capital, hopefully our conversation today will help with those feelings a bit. I'm going to stop sharing this poll and launch the second poll. What is keeping you up at night? Finance, sales, marketing, scale, pivot, team, or surviving? And this one just tells us a little bit about your current entrepreneurial needs so we can continue providing relevant content. Awesome. Connecticut, Wisconsin, Maryland, Minnesota, the Bahamas. Welcome, welcome. Tijuana. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So great to have you all here. All right, I'm going to end this poll and share these results. All right, looks like finance is in the lead. Very fitting for our conversation today. We do have sales and marketing coming up behind, so we'll take this into account for future programming. Thank you all so much for participating. I'm going to stop sharing this poll. And without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to our special guest, Geri Stengel, founder and president of VentureNear. Geri, it is so great to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Delighted to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. So, can you maybe start by talking about some of the most common challenges that early stage entrepreneurs face regarding capital and what makes it difficult to overcome these challenges, as they're kind of trying to figure out what the right capital option is for them?
So I think knowing what your capital options are, your financing options are, is difficult, and you really have to customize the options that are appropriate for you based on a bunch of different factors. So what are your aspirations? What stage are you in? How much money do you want to raise? Those are the kinds of things that are going to shape what types of capital that you're going to be looking for. And even taking into consideration the affordability and the accessibility of each of the financing options that are appropriate for your stage of business and, the amount of money that you're raising.
And so then for underrepresented entrepreneurs, what additional hurdles might they encounter when, facing these same issues?
So bias, unfortunately, is alive and well. And even when you think that, it's a computer making the decisions, it still does enter into it. So again, it's really important to know what your options are. You may have credit challenges. You may not have a high credit score. There are financing options that were created specifically for underrepresented entrepreneurs. And here, I mean, women, veterans, minorities, and I'm talking about community development financial institutions, so CDFIs. So I'm a huge fan of them, not only because they are nonprofits,
Right.
so they have the flexibility of different having lower credit requirements or credit score requirements. But what I also particularly like about them is that they also do technical assistance. So some of them, I've interviewed a handful of entrepreneurs who got bookkeeping services for free.
Wow.
Got bookkeeping services for free.
Yeah.
And that's a CDFI can do that because they're nonprofits and they're supported to do that kind of coupling of technical assistance and financing.
Okay, that's really great to know. And I think, a lot of entrepreneurs in our community often, when thinking about their financing options, their brains can immediately jump to grants and venture capital, and, loans. And then it kind of reaches a point where it's like, what else is there out there for me? And CDFIs are becoming a lot more well-known nowadays, but it's just so great to kind of emphasize those perks to kind of, potentially beginning a relationship with one of those organizations.
And I'll also mention Kiva is a good option. They're not going to lend you a lot of money in the beginning. So Kiva is a nonprofit. I call it crowdfunding light.
Right.
But you may be able to get either a few hundred, maybe even in the low single-digit thousands of dollars. Have to build up to a higher amount as they get to know you, so you have to pay back the loan. But again, I'm a big fan of Kiva as well. Crowdfunding could be a good source, in particular rewards-based crowdfunding. I'm talking about Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and I Fund Women.
And so kind of thinking about, that how you highlighted, just the importance of knowing what your options are and how they can, how your specific business needs are aligned to what, they can provide and how it would affect your business. What are some strategies that entrepreneurs can begin to employ to navigate this complex landscape and begin to identify the option that's best aligned with their strategic goals and growth trajectory?
So I certainly think aspiration or values, maybe not value, but vision and aspiration play a really important role. So for some in the audience, maybe you want to be $1 billion company, and maybe you want to be $1 billion and get company and get there really quickly. So maybe you're going to start with angel capital and then move into venture capital. But for most of you, you may be a solopreneur. I'm a solopreneur. You may be a small business, so you could have a storefront. You could be doing e-commerce. You could be doing work with government and corporations. So, and you could also fit into multiple categories. So if I'm a solopreneur that has government and corporate contracts. So I fit in a couple of different categories. And then there are the high potential companies that are growing fast. When you're scaling, meaning really, really fast, then again, angel and venture capital might be appropriate, but there's other financing options like factoring, revenue-based financing that would be appropriate for high potential companies, especially if for revenue-based financing, it's sort of formulaic. If you know that if you get X amount of money, you're going to be able to deliver Y amount of sales.
Mm-hmm. So, you've talked about a lot of different options here, and I think it's kind of important to stop for a moment and kind of just talk about the differences between dilutive and non-dilutive funding, and kind of like where some of these types of financing, like which pool they kind of fall into, and what are some of the key factors that early stage entrepreneurs should consider to determine whether or not to seek out capital that would dilute their equity in the business?
Yeah, so there's pros and cons to every single kind of financing.
Mm-hmm.
So dilutive capital would be angel and venture capital. It also would be private equity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm bringing up private equity because I do a lot of interviewing in Forbes, and within the last few months, I interviewed a technical assistance provider in Philadelphia that's doing private equity for from women and minority owned businesses that have multi-year contracts with, again, government and corporations, and they already have revenues of 5 to 10 million. So you don't have to be that scaling business, but you have to have having, a city government. I do work with New York City. I do work with large corporations as well. And when you have that contract that says, it's a 3-5 year contract, it gives the financing provider the comfort that you're going to be able to grow your business and take advantage of getting equity. With venture capital, they're looking again for really fast growth, and when you are the negatives of dilutive capital is you're giving away a piece of your company. And if you give away more than 50%, guess what? They can tell you what to do and they can kick you out of the company. Now, it's rare that happens, but I definitely have interviewed entrepreneurs in which that has happened.
So, what are, just kind of diving into that a little bit deeper, what are like some of the implications of how, a business might be impacted when some of that equity is given away? Like what are some kind of changes to the day-to-day or to the way that the business operates that an entrepreneur might commonly expect?
You're going to have to do more reporting. So you now have people that you have to tell, whether it's quarterly meetings or every 6 months, you are going to have to report on your sales, your profitability, and even if it's small percentages that they have of ownership, they will have a voice in how you're running your company. And depending upon that percentage, that voice will be bigger or smaller.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I think those are just things that every entrepreneur has to kind of consider depending on their own unique stage and their strategic goals. So I think these are really helpful insights for entrepreneurs to think about. So thank you. Kind of just stepping back a bit, we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience who have in the past or are currently bootstrapping for their business. And that may be currently or at some point the only way that the business was at that point receiving funding. So for those entrepreneurs, when is the right time to kind of start thinking about external capital? Like, are there any key indicators or milestones that would signal the business is ready for that type of transition?
So I wouldn't call it a transition. So depending upon what your goals are with the financing, you may have cash flow problems. So remember I said I have a line of credit. And, sometimes it's literally days or weeks that I just, oh my God, I just need to dip into this amount of money for a very short period of time. and having that line of credit is particularly important.
Mhm.
With banks, banks are not going to lend to you, whether it's a line of credit or a loan, at a minimum of 2 years, but more likely 3 years. So
Mhm.
you need to find partners, especially, when you're a young business, that have softer criteria. When you're talking about loans, if you're talking about other kinds of financing, each is going to have unique things that they're looking for. So if you're talking about factoring, they want your invoices. So as long as you have invoices, they're buying your invoices at a discount. So that's how that spread is how they make their money.
Mhm.
That's what they're looking at. If you're talking about revenue-based financing, they're looking at that formula that equates to, if I give you X amount of money, you're going to be able to deliver Y amount of results.
Mhm.
You're talking about angels and venture capital, and sometimes this is a little bit different. So there are angels that really care about the passion of the entrepreneur and are less focused on the hard deliverables. But a venture capitalist is for sure going to say, I expect to see this month much growth.
Mhm.
And during the pandemic, when money was flowing very, in a big way, it was almost a founder's, choice as to whether, they would go for funding and how much they would go for. It's a much harsher environment right now and much harder to get that kind of financing. So you also have to look at the market conditions. So as I'm saying that it's, harsh in the venture capital marketplace, it's also harsh in the lending marketplace. Interest rates are going up. Approval rates are going down. And what I'll say about CDFIs, community financial institutions, especially during the pandemic, is that they received a lot of philanthropic money that allowed them to lower the interest rate and in some cases give away grants. So I hope that this continues because there's been an uptick in the number of people becoming entrepreneurs, especially women of color, that, whether it's the US Treasury or banks or philanthropists, that they have more flexibility regarding the strings that they attach to the money that they give CDFIs. So again, during the pandemic, there was a lot more flexibility. And you would have seen a lot more grants that were aimed at small businesses, and they may have been focused on a particular demographic group.
Sure. So kind of thinking about all of these challenges, what are some strategies that entrepreneurs can begin to employ today to kind of start to gain this knowledge around optionality, overcome these challenges in the sense of like maybe it's a mindset adjustment, or what can entrepreneurs kind of start doing today to increase their knowledge so that they can have their capital needs met?
So one of the things, I'm glad you said mindset. So I oversee a program for New York City Small Business Services, and it's MWBE mentors. And these are very large businesses, multi-million-dollar businesses, if not tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And they proudly say that they didn't take financing. And sometimes they don't realize a line of credit is financing.
Sure.
So they have taken financing, but there is a mindset that taking money is bad. You really have to think through what your growth goals are and decide, with an expert like an accountant or a CPA, whether you have the ability to pay back that loan. you might, if it's venture capital, you're more likely to be working with your lawyer on those determinations.
Mhm.
And I don't want to say that you have to know everything about financing. I think it's really important to know the broad strokes, but I don't want to weigh down the entrepreneurs in the audience with the idea that, oh my God, you have to know every single financing option and you have to know it from the get-go. Just the broad strokes. And your banker may be able to play a role in this, but I'm going to say join business organizations, because within those business organizations, if they have a team, they may be able to connect you to a CDFI, to a good bank, to different kinds of financing options. And then there may be larger businesses that are there that can provide more mentorship or peer support. So there is something different when that voice is, has done it and seen it already.
Mhm. And so, thinking, then for underrepresented entrepreneurs, what are some strategies that they can kind of use to level the playing field, and help them gain greater access? I mean, I know you mentioned kind of some grants that are targeted towards specific demographics, but kind of considering the current climate, what might underrepresented entrepreneurs think about when, striving to gain greater access to the right kind of capital for their business?
Yeah, so grants are great. And certainly during the pandemic, more grants were flowing. But you also have to think through whether that amount of money is worth it. So again, I interviewed some entrepreneurs who, at a certain point, chasing after $5,000, given what their revenue levels were, wasn't honestly worth it. But you certainly could set up Google alerts, with the word grant in it, with the word women or minority, just so that you're alerted to, is there one for $20,000 or $25,000? If you're starting out, 5,000 is worth going after. Again, are you gonna, every grant is going to have you do something. Sometimes it's, and actually, I think it's more work for the smaller amounts of money. And I'm not, so if it's a really big amount of money, you have to do a lot of work. Like if you're going for a small business innovation research grant, that's, really, really a heavy lift. And you really need to be a really good grant writer. But, $1,000 to $25,000 grants, I'm going to say that the $1,000 grant may come with more work to do than the $25,000 grant. So you really have to weigh how much work that you're going to that you need to do. And I may miss some of the. I'm not sure if I hit all the points on that one.
Yeah, no, that's really, really great. And I wanted to kind of touch on something that you mentioned a couple moments ago of kind of the importance of joining business networks. And what role does mentorship and networking and kind of like that those lines of support play in helping early stage entrepreneurs gain greater access to capital? So like, do you have any examples of how entrepreneurs can kind of, leverage the insights that they gain from these interactions to kind of overcome the barriers that are hindering their access to capital, or how it can just, maybe open them up to new opportunities that they weren't aware of before?
So you've seen the proliferation of accelerator programs, and accelerator programs always comes with a ton of mentorship. And that mentorship isn't just other founders, it's very importantly investors. Right. So they're entering a business competition or, becoming part of an accelerator program just for the connections, especially if you're a woman or a minority and don't have those connections to angel and venture capitalists, can help you shorten the time to building that network, because you've got to get a ton of referrals to get one yes. And that's really going to, differ. So right now, if you're in AI, maybe it's going to be pretty easy to get money. But if you're in, let's say, healthcare was really hot in the pandemic, but interest has really cooled down right now. Mentorship shortens the timeline. People have a lot of experience if you're open to digesting it. And I'll tell a story about when I was mentoring, and I do have some rules around mentoring. I will not be your mentor because I had to fire a mentee because she became so demanding of my time and in off hours that I realized that unless it's my expertise, please don't ask me. She expected me to have answers to questions that were outside of my knowledge area. Really having access to people that have been there and done that is really important, but then also having the judgment to know whether you really want to take their advice or not. So I'm not saying that you always take your mentor's advice.
Sure. Yeah, no. I think that's really important. It's like you still have to kind of have those, have that like kind of focus of like, what's right for my business? What do I need to get done to like achieve my strategic goals? So I think that's really an important note. So I wanted to jump back to something that you mentioned at the beginning, which was the importance of aligning your capital needs with your vision and your values. So can you talk a little bit more about why this is so important and some of the key factors that early stage entrepreneurs can think about when trying to balance these two elements of their business?
So I'm going to say that values plays more of a role in angels and venture capital than it would with loans and other types of financing, which is much more formulaic. So values are really important. So if you feel that an investor isn't aligned with your values, you're probably right, and you probably don't want to take their money. So that could be how fast you grow the company. That could be, the concept of do anything just to grow. Many entrepreneurs, especially I'm going to say female founders, really want to be able to connect and have good chemistry and a shared value, because you can go back to them and say, I'm having this problem. I need your help with it.
Yeah.
Know that you're going to get a good response. A lot of times, if you are not values aligned, going to your investors when you have a problem could cause a problem, an even bigger problem.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think that kind of touches on something else that I wanted to mention, which was, how the long-term relationship with, whichever capital provider you end up working with, that long-term relationship is so important. It's not just like a handoff of money. It's something that continues for a while after that exchange. So what advice can you give to early stage entrepreneurs as they're kind of looking to build and nurture these long-term relationships with capital providers, that they've, found are aligned with their values?
So I'm going to say be selective in who you build relationships with. You don't have to build relationships with all types of different financing options. You might choose your banker. And certainly if you're raising venture capital and, angel financing, building those relationships, even if they're saying no to you, if they think you're good, they'll make a referral to somebody else. And that goes for a banker also. So bankers may refer you because, they don't lend to, young startups, but they might refer you to a CDFI or to an equipment financing company or something, some other form of financing. And a story comes to mind that I was told about Hint Water. So Kay Kopovitz, and I don't remember it's not a fund. They do, she has access to a group of other investors, and then they invest more like a syndicate. So during the pandemic, very early on, they checked in with all of their, with all of the companies that they had founded, and Hint Water was doing really well. And the question is to really take advantage of how well they were doing, they needed more money. Really, I'm not going to say within minutes, but in a very short period of time, within that syndicate of investors, they were able to raise the money. I'm going to say in weeks, which is highly unusual.
Yeah.
For a company raising, venture capital.
Right. That's really, really amazing. And I'm wondering kind of just what advice you might give to early stage entrepreneurs with more limited resources, and team network support, how they might demonstrate market potential and a strong value proposition, when they're trying to form those relationships.
So again, if it's the way that you might do it, if you're going for venture capital, is it's no longer necessary to actually write a physical business plan, but you have to think of everything that's in a business plan. And then you can do it as an outline, which is really your pitch deck. And you really have to show that you have the potential to deliver, So you have to show that it's a lucrative market. It has to be $1 billion market, that you can address a large part of that market, X percentage of the market, that you know the strategy, no, maybe too strong a word, that you have a credible strategy for marketing to that target market. If you're very early stage, you still may not have proven product market fit, but you want to show that you are adaptable, and that you have the ability to, change your strategy when it's not working.
And yeah, I think that just really harkens back to the concept of just, the sustainability and the scalability of the business, and presenting that in a way that stands out. So kind of to close out this conversation, I wanted to ask, kind of just thinking about some of the things we've talked about, these challenges, and aligning your capital needs with your values. For entrepreneurs who are kind of in the midst of this process, how can the experiences that they're having, the wins, the setbacks, how can they be used to kind of better inform their future interactions with capital providers, or partners, whoever it may be, in that realm?
So I'm going to say that really sharing with other entrepreneurs, founders, is really important, because there's insights that is not going to come from like the financing option. So you're not going to know, let's say you're going after angel and venture capital money. Another investor is not going to give you the inside story on a difficult investor, but another founder would. So, knowing other founders, and that might be, joining an accelerator program, partially, because they're going to be teaching you things, but it's also that you want to build those relationships so that you have people that you can go to, that you can test ideas out with. And I would say that is equally as important if you're a solopreneur or small business, or any kind of business, because again, it takes one to know one.
Yeah.
So getting that advice from somebody who has been there and done that is really, really important because again, they can really shorten your learning time.
Mhm.
And again, filters things, use your own judgment to know whether it's the right option for you. Just because if somebody is a mentor doesn't mean that they know everything.
Sure. But yeah, no, I think that's so important. And like I work with our Milestone Makers Acceleration Program, and there's founders kind of bouncing these ideas off of each other kind of as they're struggling with these challenges. And it's really interesting, you know, when somebody's been struggling with something for so long and somebody's like, oh, well, I this is how I do it. This is the way that I do it. And they were like, oh my gosh, I've never known about this, or I've never thought about this. Thank you so much. And it's just amazing to see that kind of camaraderie from founder to founder. So I really, really love that point. Thank you. Awesome. Well, Geri, this has been such a great conversation. We are going to jump into live Q&A at this point. So if you are in the audience and you have a question, please make sure to drop it in that Q&A function at the bottom. We will try to get to as many as possible. So just right off the bat, we have kind of a lot of entrepreneurs wondering, like, where can I find more information on bank loans or CDFIs or grants? You know, are there government websites they can look to? Are there advisors that they might ask? Where might you point them to?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with CDFIs because I think banks are relatively easy or easier to find out. So CDFIs are community development financial institutions, are nonprofits, and they're usually local organizations. There's very few that have a very big footprint. And you know, getting a referral from a bank or several of the banks, including Wells Fargo, have, and I think it's Small Business Navigator is the resource from Wells Fargo. But the CDFIs also have, you know, you could, you know, keyword search, Google is your friend,
Right.
and also find out. And CDFIs will, because they're nonprofits, and they are less competitive with each other. So if one is not the fit for you, they're likely to be able to recommend the other one. So usually in your local, I'm in New York, so we're going to have a, you know, a fair number of CDFIs, but you know, the CDFIs will frequently refer you to other CDFIs, especially if they're having a special program. So that special program could be a grant that's targeted towards a specific demographic, or it could be just a lower interest rate. But whatever it is, they all know each other and they work more collaboratively than banks would. Banks, I would say that if you're a small business, you know, the larger banks are going to be harder to work with than the smaller banks. You're going to know which the smaller banks are in your area, and you can vet them by talking to other entrepreneurs. So there's not really, well, you know what, you could probably search Google or now Google Bard. It's improved dramatically. I'm now using it on a research project, and I'm like, oh my God, I just saved hours.
I know, right?
I mean, hours.
It's crazy.
It is. I haven't tried it for that particular scenario, but I think it's actually worth trying. And I, you know, mentioned setting up Google Grants, Google Alerts, you know, just keywords that, you know, that are around your demographic or your industry, so that you know when, you know, a grant possibility comes up, and then of course you have to weigh whether it's worth the time and the effort.
Right. Awesome. That's super helpful. So we have a question kind of asking about businesses that experience more regulatory hurdles, like healthcare related organizations. So do you have any information on like what extra considerations they may have to make when kind of seeking out VC or angel funding, or is there kind of an expert that you would point them to for that kind of conversation?
So healthcare is, a lot of regulations are around it. You probably can do, whether it's Google Bard, or another AI program to do it. But if you're a founder in that area, chances are you already know a lot of the issues. And if you talk to other founders, you definitely do. So I've done enough interviews within that category to know that there are lots of experts in that area that are happy to talk to you, including lawyers that have that expertise. I would not say that I have that expertise, but if you're networking and you happen to meet a lawyer, that one question that you're asking, that 5-minute answer, you're not going to get charged for.
Yeah, totally. No, I think that's super helpful as they're kind of trying to figure out like how to navigate that situation. So we have an interesting question here, kind of about how you might kind of determine whether a grant is fraudulent, or kind of just making sure that the capital provider that you're working with is credible. So what are some things that entrepreneurs can think about when kind of making that evaluation?
I never thought about that.
Sure.
So, and I haven't mentioned this before, and I should have, but there really isn't a centralized source for grants, but close organizations that promote other people's grants might be, they won't be totally comprehensive, but Hello Alice would be a good source. Funded, FUNDID, would be, I think it's Get Funded, would be a good place. So again, you're having somebody that's screening it, but at least the grants that I've seen are usually coming from names that I've heard of before, that have been around for a while. There definitely are grants that are from smaller groups that I'm not aware of. But again, I would search online to see, if it's reputable, or talk to other entrepreneurs about it. So again, you never know in a conversation who's gonna, know somebody would have a sense of that particular, provider.
Awesome. That's super helpful. We have an entrepreneur in the audience wondering more about acceleration programs. So can you quickly just talk about what exactly acceleration programs are and how they can be helpful in like your pursuit of capital as a business leader?
So the traditional accelerator program is going to take a piece of your company. I think it varies between 3% and 6%. They'll probably give you a little bit of money, but not a huge amount of money because you're very early stage. And they're, taking sometimes a substantial amount, meaning that it's 3 to 6% for, maybe $100,000. So that's something that you want to weigh into your decision. There certainly are accelerator programs that don't take a percentage. And those are typically nonprofits or more starter accelerator programs, as opposed to like Techstars or 500 startups and those accelerator programs. They do training, but really the value is around the mentorship and the access to capital. So they're going to have a demo day at the end of the 3-month training period, where you're going to have the ability to meet a lot of investors, but also because you're at the demo day, you're doing a presentation, people are going to be reaching out to you, and it short circuits your time to find the right financing. But again, your weighing is giving that percentage up worth it.
Awesome. That's super helpful. We have a couple questions kind of related to communication strategy and particularly around cold outreach. So do you have any advice for early stage entrepreneurs who are still kind of looking to grow their network, and they're kind of connecting with new people to, make meaningful interactions with the right people.
Especially during the early pandemic stage, cold calling was very effective. And I don't mean making that telephone call, but reaching out, whether it's through LinkedIn or an email, and customizing it to make sure that it's highly personalized. And why that, in the particular story that I wrote about, why that investor should speak to you. Is very effective. And I used to do it. Now it's really hard for me to keep up with the number of people that want to, have meetings with me on LinkedIn. But early on, I used to do meetings with everybody if you asked me to. It really right now it's I'm just so overloaded that it's really difficult for me to.
Right.
But during the pandemic, because you went from in-person to online, people were much more, I don't know, sympathetic, if that's the right word, much more open to having those calls with you, because they understood that everybody was anxious, and that conversation would be really meaningful. And again, that whoever it is that you're talking to might not be the right person, but they would connect you to the right person. And understanding that it's not always, oh my God, a one-on-one kind of thing that you're going to get something, immediately from those interactions. But, if you have the right expectation and mindset, it can be highly effective to do cold outreach, but it really, really has to be personalized.
Yeah, that's super important. Love it. Kind of similar, but on a slightly different topic. We have an entrepreneur kind of wondering about pitch strategy, and kind of like, once you're in a room with an investor, what are kind of the do's and don'ts? Maybe if you had any like resources that are helpful for putting a pitch together, or a kind of like advisor that would be helpful and kind of like helping business leaders kind of pick out the parts of what they do that are most important to an investor to communicate. So do you have any advice there?
Yes, and I also have a deck on it. So if I forget, just remind me and I will share it. So
awesome.
For New York City Small Business Development several years ago, I did it very formulaically, but it's very good for somebody that doesn't have experience in doing pitch decks. So it's not going to give you the razzle dazzle kind of stuff, but it's really going to get you to the point where, oh my God, yes, this is a decent, pitch. And I'm like, in it, it's literally going to say, okay, stop now, write a paragraph.
Yeah.
Stop now, add this to it. Stop now, add that to it. And working you into, the pitch deck is not just for raising venture capital and angel money. It's really for any pitch. But is that formula? You want to get people's attention in the beginning. You want to make sure that you have a call to action at the end. You want to make sure that you have the meat and potatoes in the middle. And what qualifies as the meat and potatoes. So, you want to make sure that you really have defined your value proposition. And that's important, whether you're pitching a customer, whether you're pitching an investor, whether you're pitching or talking to a banker, is to be able to do it in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes. So being sensitive to the amount of time. So if you're at a networking meeting, you want to get it down to 30 seconds. If you're meeting somebody for coffee, maybe you're doing 3 or 4 minutes. Sitting across the table at a formal meeting, maybe you do want to do 20 minutes.
Yeah, No, that's super helpful. So there's kind of like, you have to think about who your audience is, and just really make sure, kind of similarly, that it's like in a way personalized to their needs. So I love that. We have a few entrepreneurs in the audience that are kind of wondering specifically how they might find grants for female founders. So do you have any advice for how, entrepreneurs of any underrepresented group may find grants or other forms of capital that are specifically catered to them?
Yeah. So remember what I said? Google is your friend.
Yep.
So again, the Google alerts, female founder, woman of color, Black female founder. You can search for all of those words either on a periodic. Sometimes. So again, it's. I'm not telling you this from just my experience. It's entrepreneurs telling me how they did it.
Mhm.
So set up that Google alert and then double check it every couple of weeks by just keyword searching for it. Check Hello Alice, check Funded. Funded, I think, will actually proactively email you with grant opportunities.
Mhm.
And again, if it's coming from Funded or Hello Alice, I'm going to say that it's pre-screened,
Right.
so you're going to know that they're professional, they're credible. It doesn't mean that they're not going to have a lot of work that you need to do. So that pitch deck, it could be that you have to do a video,
Right.
or it could be that you have to do something written.
Mm.
So again, the pitch deck that I'll send so that you can share it with everybody, will give the structure for thinking about it so that you don't have to be so nervous about it. Once you've gotten past the nerves, you can, start maybe working with somebody that's going to give you the razzle dazzle. But again, it's a very structured, formulaic way of doing a presentation.
Mhm. Awesome. Love it. We have an entrepreneur who's kind of wondering about how they, as a business leader of a startup that's international from the United States, how they might kind of navigate their search for capital. Are there extra considerations they would make as an international business? And are there grants? Are there kind of capital providers that are specific for them? Do you have any kind of information there?
Yeah, that's one I'm a little bit stuck on. But again, I'm going to say Google is your friend.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect.
I would even try Bard.
Uh-huh.
Just because I honestly don't know
Yeah.
in that particular case,
Mhm.
but I would experiment. And again, talking to people who were just like you.
Mhm.
So find that organization that caters to international companies, maybe within your industry, and they're going to be the ones that really have the best answers for you.
Mhm. Awesome. Love it. All right. I think we have time for one more question. So, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making in their search for the right capital option? And what are some ways they can maybe avoid making those mistakes?
Yeah, so I think the biggest mistake is looking for money when you really need money, because you're going to make a decision because you feel desperate. So again, I'm not telling you that you have to be an expert in all financing right now, but just understand the high level of which options are right for you in certain cases. So there are moments in time that expensive capital is absolutely the right solution. So merchant cash advance is short-term financing that is relatively expensive, but it is short-term. You have to pay it back relatively quickly. But if you're desperate, you're going to get one that's really expensive as opposed to one that's within a reasonable amount of money.
Right. Awesome. Love it. All right. If you had one piece of wisdom or key takeaway from this conversation that you wanted to leave with the audience, what would that be?
If entrepreneurs knew all of their financing options, they would raise money faster and at a lower cost. So that's really, that one thought that I would like to convey to everybody. And again, you don't have to dig down really deep on it.
Awesome. Geri, thank you so much for your incredible insights. This was super, super helpful. I learned a lot on behalf of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone here today. Just so thankful that you joined us.
Well, thank you. It was a great opportunity.
Awesome. And to our audience here today, we would love for you to join us again for upcoming webinars, which you can view using the links that are going to be posted in the chat. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.